Dr. Jan Marco Müller. Jan is in one of the key engine rooms on this, working as the assistant to Chief Science Advisor to President of the European Commission, Manuel Barroso, and Glover. And so managing the office and doing a whole lot more besides, I think. So, Jan, we're really interested in what you have to say, and we'll be looking very closely for any slight discrepancies from Anne's talk yesterday.
So I'm already the second geographer on this panel, so our discipline seems to be useful for something. Yeah. Also following Bob's intervention yesterday, I thought I've changed my presentation a bit, and I thought let's talk a little bit about how science advice in Brussels works. And perhaps just go to this quote, which President Barroso said in the European Parliament in September 2009. And he said, we also need a fundamental review of the way European institutions access and use scientific advice. Note, he doesn't say here European Commission, he says European institutions. And in next Commission, I want to set up a chief scientific advisor who has the power to deliver proactive scientific advice throughout all stages of policy development and delivery. This will reflect the central importance I attach to research innovation. And of course, this statement also follows similar statements from the usual suspects like John Beddington and others asking that we need more science advice in European policies. Now, as we all know, Europe is a rather complex matter, or as Henry Kissinger put it, who do I call if I want to call Europe? I think we managed in the meantime to reduce it to 3 telephone numbers, but we're advancing. Just to remind us that obviously Europe is very diverse. It's a very diverse continent. We have 23 community languages, and it doesn't even count all the regional ones. We have 3 alphabets and a lot of kind of national traditions and cultures also in the way science advice is provided. And just to follow with my presentation, just let me give you a 1-minute crash course EU for dummies, just that we are all on the same level here. So just to present you the 3 big actors in Brussels. So we have the European Commission, which represents the interests of Europe as a whole, and it's the institution that has the right of initiative. So it is the institution that provides the proposals, the legislative proposal. It implements also the European policies, manages the budgets, and acts as what we call the guardian of the treaties. So it sues the member states if they don't behave well and comply with the EU legislation they have subscribed to. And it also represents the internationally, for example, at the climate negotiations. We have the second big institution, the European Parliament, which represents the citizens of Europe, which controls the European Commission. And the Parliament, together with the European Council, approves the legislation, which is proposed by the Commission. Parliament is elected directly every 5 years, next year. It has 736 members, 6 of them being scientists. I think the ratio in national parliaments is probably not much different. It's the reality we are faced with. But here, perhaps the impact is a little bit higher because the European policies, by their nature, are much more technical than national policies, because the big bulk of European legislation is about harmonization, standardization, and this is simply technical issues. And then, of course, we have the European Council, meeting right now in Brussels to negotiate the budget for the next 7 years. So that's the summit of the heads of states, and there's also another formation which we call the Council of the European Union, which is then at ministerial level. So it's the development ministers meeting, the environment ministers meeting, the research ministers meeting, etc. And the Council, together with, like the Parliament, well, has to agree to all the new legislation. So actually, all legislation coming from Brussels has also the signature from each single member state. Let's not forget about this. But the Council also, it has kind of the overarching priority setting function. And in a way is, as we know, perhaps the most powerful of the 3 institutions, because that's where the heads of state sit together. Okay, now where's the science in this triangle between these 3 institutions? And they, of course, often, let's say, clash with each other. Sometimes it's the Commission and the Parliament against the Council, or the Parliament and the Council against the Commission, or everybody against everybody, whatever. So where stays the science in all of this? Now, in an ideal world, of course, science is everywhere in the policy cycle. It starts with the policy anticipation, foresight. in the formulation, where we have the expert involvement, the policy adoption, implementation, of course, the ad hoc policy support in crisis situations, for instance, policy evaluation, etc. So that's the cycle where obviously science should feed in. Now, if we just have a closer look at the European Commission, so this institution of setup in science in the European Commission. So we have the president, we have the chief scientific advisor. I'm going to talk about this in a second. So she's reporting directly to the president. She's in a way outside the organigram because she's an independent voice. She can say things the rest of the Commission cannot say because she's the voice of science. She's administratively supported by an entity which we call the Bureau of European Policy Advisors, which is essentially economic advisors and some sociology advisors. There's also the Secretary General of the Commission. That's where the Impact Assessment Board sits. I'm going to talk about this also in a second. And then, of course, we have the 26 commissioners, one of them being Mrs. Gagan-Quinn, the Commissioner for Research, Innovation and Science. And below the commissioners is, so to speak, the administration, is what we call the Directorates Generals. One could say one could say the ministries of within the European Commission, where you have DG Research Innovation, which is in charge of the research policies, Horizon 2020, etc. But under Mrs. Gagan-Quinn is also the Joint Research Centre, which is the science service of the European Commission. And let's talk a little bit about this one, because the JRC is a very peculiar beast. It's a science service of the Commission, so it has the task, let's say one could do, to do regulatory science, to underpin scientific, technically, the Commission policies. It has 3,000 staff, out of which 2,000 researchers. Very few people know that the Commission employs more researchers than interpreters. Now, the Commission, what is very interesting about the JRC, it has the formal status of the Directorate General of the Commission, which means it has the rank of a ministry. I don't know any other government or government-like structure in the world where the science service has the rank of a ministry on an equal footing with the policy ministries, which in itself gives science quite a strong voice in the European Commission. And the reason for this is obviously this very technical character of many European policies. And kind of the policy directors generals of the Commission, they are very used to working with the scientists, involved in from the very beginning in the development of the policy when it gets to thresholds, to measurements, etc., etc., etc. So that's JRC. And then we have the Chief Scientific Advisor, Anne Glover, whom we saw yesterday. So she started beginning of last year. And I wasn't working in JRC when the President made the announcement. And of course, we are asking ourselves, okay, we have the JRC, why do we need a Chief Scientific Advisor? But actually, it is quite easy to explain, because the JRC as a science service does the scientific technical support when the policy is developed, up to the stage when it gets to the political level. Then it's adopted by the Commission, it goes to Parliament and Council, and this is a kind of black box. And at the end of the process, when the policy is adopted, then the JRC comes into play again when it comes into implementation. And what the Chief Scientific Advisor actually does is to fill this gap, this black box on a political level, to ensure the voice of science at this level. It's interesting to look here into the mandate of the Chief Scientific Advisor. I'm not going to read all of this, but just to remind you that there are basically 4 strands in her responsibility. The first is providing science advice to the President. So he can, whenever he thinks I need more scientific information on this particular issue, she comes to Anne Glover, or vice versa. She goes to the President and says, look, here's a new development you should know about. The second strand is the networking issue, because there are many instances providing science advice to the Commission. And she has some kind of coordinating task there. I'm going to discuss this in a second. The third one is the foresight function, kind of early warning function, and saying, look, here's a new development, okay. And the last one is the outreach. So I say, in a way, Anne Glover is the cheerleader running along the football field and stimulating the public to cheer for the scientists when they play with the politicians. Now the JRC and the Chief Scientific Advisor are not the only sources of scientific advice. there are also a lot of scientific committees and expert groups, and we shouldn't underestimate the importance of them. Because in the expert groups, often they actually write the legislation. I mean, Bob, you probably know INSPIRE, Infrastructure for Spatial Information Europe, where we have the Met offices, the geological surveys, etc., actually writing legislation and agreeing on the common standards. We have, of course, the agencies, many of them science-driven with a science advisory role, like the Food Safety Authority, Chemicals Agency, Environment Agency, etc. And, of course, we have all the research capacities in the member states. How does the Commission procure? How does the Commission procure scientific advice? So it can use its in-house resources. It can use the formal advisory bodies, like the agencies, public consultation, contracting of studies, and of course we have the proactive feed-in from stakeholders. One could also say just lobbying of whoever, business associations, but also research councils. And all of these influence the Commission proposals. They then go through an impact assessment. There's a formal procedure, and it's adopted by the college. But what happens then? And that's where then I want to also to finish. Then the political bargaining starts, because the proposal leaves the Commission. It goes to across the street to the Council and to the Parliament. And the Council and the Parliaments, they don't have a science service. They don't have any formal science advisory structures. The Parliament has STOA, which is a kind of little foresight office, doing a little bit, but not really a science service. And that's where the voice of science is missing, and where Glover, well, tries to influence, to bring the voice of science into the debate, to stimulate also societal debate about new technologies. Now, just to finish, there are two caveats here you should know about. The first one is her mandate is tied to the one of President Barroso, which means the function of Chief Science Advisor will cease to exist at the end of next year, unless somebody in Europe screams, oh, it's good that we have one, and we should continue further developing this idea. And second, you see here 1/4 of the team. It's Anne, it's me, and 2 other colleagues. That's it. Now, you could, of course, say that's mission impossible. In Scotland, Anne had a team of 12 in a nation of 5 million. Now she's in charge of 500 million people with 3 people. Okay, but I'm an optimist, so I see always the glass half full, and I think we should use the opportunity. We have a tremendous opportunity as a voice of science here to influence the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.